My name is Dr. Robert Leahy. I'm a psychologist in New York City. I'm a clinical professor of psychology in the psychiatry department at Weill Cornell in New York. And I'm also the director of the American Institute for Cognitive Therapy. I wanted to speak to you today about some of the issues in decision making that lead us to have greater regret. Now, keep in mind that we all have regrets. That's part of the human condition. But some of us really get stuck on regret and feel that we should have known better, that we could have done a better job, and that what we have right now is just absolutely inferior and terrible. What leads to greater regret after our decision has been made? In my book, I lay out a number of styles of making decisions that may make you more prone to regret. Because keep in mind, regret is always about a decision you've made or a decision that you anticipate making. But there are certain ways of thinking, certain kinds of styles of making decision that lead to greater regret. One is hindsight bias. For example, the idea that I should have known what I know now. I should have known that this job would have been an unfulfilling job when I took it. I should have known that at the time. And so now I have greater regret and blame myself and feel that I'm somewhat of an idiot for taking the job. Hindsight bias is a very common part of post-decision. After the decision, we think, we're kind of Monday morning quarterbacks. We think we knew on Saturday or Sunday what should have been done. But of course, everybody's really better at predicting the past. We're not that good at predicting the future. So the real question is regarding hindsight bias is, what did you actually know at the time? Were you actually thinking that this is going to be a bad decision? Or were you relying on the information that was available that you thought, well, this is a plausible and reasonable thing to do? So hindsight bias may be part of your propensity toward greater regret. The second factor is the tendency to idealize the alternative. It's like what you could have had or would have had would have made your life immensely better. So if you had married a different person or taken a different job or had a different major or went to a different resort for a vacation or anything, you begin to idealize what you did not do as if it was absolutely perfect and there would have been no downside. It's hard to imagine that those idealized alternatives actually exist because we often tend to have distortions, positive distortions about what we don't have. We often think, for example, that celebrities have the absolute perfect life, even though they're on their fourth divorce and they're in rehab for the 10th time. So think about, are you idealizing the alternative, which then leads you to devalue what you have compared to it. Another factor that leads to regret, contributes to it, is what I call essentialism. Essentialism is the belief that certain outcomes are absolutely necessary rather than simply a preference. So the idea of essentialism is that it's essential that I have the best job, the best partner, the best home, the best life. This kind of essentialism is also related to what I describe in the book as existential perfectionism, which is the idea that somehow our lives need to be absolutely perfect and that something is essential. If something were essential, then how do you account for the fact that 5.5 billion people in the world don't have that thing that's essential? So some of these things that we think are essential are simply preferences. It's like going to a buffet and they don't have your favorite dish at the buffet. Well, there may be many, many other things at the buffet, and you can rank order your preferences rather than think, this thing is 100%, everything else is zero. So essentialism leads us to this black and white thinking. The next thing is, and related to this, is what I call inflexible expectations. That is your inability to change expectations after the fact to match the reality you're experiencing. So you think, well, this is what I expected in the relationship, or this is what I expected in the job. And then you hold on to these expectations as demands and requirements, and then devalue everything else that you have. These inflexible expectations make it very difficult for you to live in the real world, no matter what decisions you make. And finally, the tendency after things don't go exactly the way you want to engage in self-criticism. I should have known better. I'm so stupid. I can't make decisions. What's wrong with me? Now, it may be that you made a decision in an irrational way and you didn't use the relevant information. But rather than criticize yourself, maybe you can learn from the experience. It's kind of like if you had a tennis coach and you kept hitting the ball into the net, do you want the coach to come over and take the racket and hit you over the head and tell you how stupid you are? Or would it be better for your coach to say, well, here's how to hold the racket and how to swing? So self-correction is a much more adaptive response to decisions that don't go well than self-criticism. So these are just a few of the many ideas that I describe in my book, and I do hope that you have a chance to read it because I think it might give you some ideas that you can use in your real life. Thanks for listening.